Hello and welcome to the Cash vs. Trash podcast with your hosts, Rob and
Demi, where we watch the highest and lowest grossing movie of each year from 1970 to 2021 picked at random, then decide if they deserve the title of either cash or trash.
That's right. And this week we are finishing off the year 2000 with a little black comedy movie called Cecil B. Demented. Lowest grossing movie of the year 2000, obviously.
Yeah.
Asterix, out of the top 200.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before. We want it to be as fair of a fight as possible, so this was like 197, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
So
and there was more movies after 200, like
that's why I said
the 200 list. Yeah.
That's why I said out of the top 200.
But the movies after that are just like only get released in one small country.
Yeah.
And it's just not fair to compare.
Yeah. Because it's, why was this one the highest grossing and that one was the lowest grossing? Oh, that's why. That one got released in one cinema in Albuquerque and that one was released worldwide. Yeah,
so we try to make it as fair as possible.
Yes, and Cecil B. Demented did get a limited release, but it
was still released in a fair few countries.
Yeah, and it was at all film festivals and was a good at least 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
That it was in domestic box office, so American. So that's a long enough time to make a decent amount of money
if your movie's good.
Yeah, and so but we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Just had to put that disclaimer at the start.
Yeah.
So yeah, Cecil B. Demented, starring Melanie Griffith as Honey Whitlock.
You might have seen her in a movie called Working Girl or Body Double.
Yep. And Stephen Dorff as the titular character, Cecil B. Demented.
And he's pretty well known for his role in Blade and Immortals.
Mm-hmm. Especially Blade. Released August 2000 to a limited cinema release in the US, but if you dig a little deeper, you'll see that it was released in a fair few European countries as well.
And also Australia and the UK.
Yeah, and in Australia, New Zealand, and I think there was India.
Yeah,
and a few other places. So not a small release, and it was in a fair few places for a few weeks at a time. So, like we said, that's enough time.
Yeah.
To have an impact. And Melanie Griffith was a decent, big enough name at the time, and so was Stephen Dorff. And most of the cast was, I can't remember, but at that time, maybe not very popular, but a lot of the actors that were in this
really popular, yeah.
Some are A-list, and I've seen pretty much everyone in this movie I've seen somewhere else.
Yeah, me too.
So,
yeah.
Written and directed by John Waters, who I think also wrote and directed, but he definitely directed Cry Baby, starring Johnny Depp. And infamous for his first ever movie or theatrical release movie, Pink Flamingos, which, if you are familiar with that movie, I don't care to know you.
I haven't seen it, but you read out like what it's about, and I just thought that sounds like the worst movie ever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd want to watch it. If a movie has a good enough story, then I'll watch it. So even without all the horrible shit that's in that movie, there is a lot of actual shit.
Yeah.
Then, I'll give it a go. But yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's not really much more to say about it, but we'll talk about his, like what John Waters, the quotes that I was reading out of his and who he is as a person, and then where Pink Flamingos sits on like shocking versus this, where this is supposed to be shocking, but 22 years on, we'll get into it.
So the budget for this movie was like around 9-10 million. It grossed 1.3 million domestically.
Yep.
680,000 internationally. and so roughly like 1.92 million worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
It premiered at the Cannes Festival.
Cannes
Cannes
Festival.
Film Festival, yeah,
Very famous.
in May 2000, and then had a pretty, like we said, limited cinema released in August, but
Yes.
still a fair amount of time if your
Yeah.
movie's good to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we get this information, as we always say, based off Box Office Mojo and sometimes help from thenumbers.com.
Yes. And the further we go back, and when it's a lowest grossing movie, it's a lot harder to find accurate information. We had to do a fair bit of digging for info on this movie.
Yeah.
There was no making of that we could find.
No, not really any behind the scenes or interviews.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not a very complicated movie, so
Yeah.
we did find some like John Waters talking about it and
Yeah.
everything, but I mean, it's one of those movies where there's not really anything that's special about it to find info or background info on, I suppose. Yeah.
Which wasn't his goal. Like, you
Yeah.
know, his goal was for it to be special. But anyway. It was also rated 52% on Rotten Tomatoes, so
Which surprises me.
rotten. I would have thought it got less.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I would have thought it. I would have thought it would be much less.
Maybe the French liked it.
Well, the French would like this. I think it's weird and abstract and,
Strange.
but to me, too mainstream looking and feeling.
Yeah.
But
We'll get more into that.
yeah, we'll talk more about that in spoilers. How about you give a summary of the movie for the audience?
Yep. So, Cecil B. Demented. This movie's about an underground filmmaker and his renegade team who kidnap an A-list Hollywood actress and then pretty much just force her to be the main star in their film.
Yes, it's a very strange movie, very edgy and cool.
Yeah,
it
very
comes across.
edgy.
Yeah, which John Waters would have been, geez, in his 60s
Yeah.
when he made this movie, and he even talked about in that interview, like, you know, he understands the older you get, the less you understand about what's young and cool, and I could definitely feel this sort of clash throughout the movie of young culture back then. So what's that, like Gen X or millennials?
Don't ask me.
I'd say it must be Gen X, because that's like 90s and very early 2000s, I believe. So yeah, Gen X
Generation.
yeah, but like what they think was cool and stuff, but it's feels like it's trying so hard to be like, oh, we know all this stuff about movies, and that's really like, that's why we're better, but then it also feels like it's taking the piss out of these characters.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like John Waters said, he wanted to make a movie where people would die and kill over their opinions on movies, and that works. I think that he got that spot on. He was inspired by a magazine company, sent out a thing to its readers to say, attack this other rival one, or something like that. And some of them actually did. And when he read about that, he was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, it's a solid idea. The movie had a lot of potential, but it wasn't shocking enough.
No.
And yeah, so that's all I have really to say that's non-spoilers. I think I would say go out and watch this one before you listen to us talk about spoilers.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's just not what the movie was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And you feel that.
But there are developments and, well, like I said, characters kill and die for their love of movies, so there are character deaths in the movie that I wouldn't want spoiled before I watched it. Because it is an ensemble movie, more or less, and you do get attached to some characters, and the action is very quick, and when deaths do come, it's just bam, 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 and they all, you don't see it coming.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
get over it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think there's only one big reaction to a death.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's all I have to say. Non-spoilers.
Yeah,
Yep.
same, pretty much.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get into the spoiler talk. We'll give everyone a break. Normally I'd count down, but we have a little. You'll hear the music, and then after that, we'll be in spoilers.
Yep.
Yep. Spoilers now. We're in spoiler time. You've had your chance. I don't really know how to start spoilers. Normally I'd say the ending
Yeah.
to show we mean business, but everything in this movie is so inconsequential. I guess Honey Whitlock gets Stockholm Syndrome and
Joins them.
and joins the cult.
Yeah. And it is pretty much a cult.
Yeah. Demented forever.
Demented forever.
Yeah, it's a
That's
cult.
been stuck in my head since we watched it last night.
Well, I haven't stopped singing it.
Yeah.
No budget.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But this movie just, like, it was boring.
Well, this movie is just the same thing.
Over and over again. Yeah.
It's, they kidnap her, then they shoot a scene, and they have some time at the warehouse or abandoned theater or whatever, and then they go out and shoot a scene, then they escape to... Well, the first time they don't escape, it just cuts and they're back at the place.
Yeah.
And then they go out, and then one of them gets killed, and then they go back, or they get saved by the action fans, and then they go out, and then they get saved by the porno theater fans, and then they go out, and then it ends.
Yeah.
So it's...
And every time they go out, there's like shooting and
Yeah.
yelling and really fast running, and then they're back. And then it's that again. Yeah. It's just, nothing stood out. It was just boring.
I did like that it wasn't afraid of killing off its characters. You meet 8 of them, I think there is.
Yeah.
And by the end, there's only 4 or 5, including Honey, left alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, the main character, Cecil, dies in the end.
And he dies by being lit on fire after being shot 2 or 3 times.
Does he get shot?
Yeah. He gets shot on the deck on his right arm, or his left arm, sorry.
Yeah,
and then he gets shot in his right shoulder. And I think he gets shot in the leg because he has a limp. And he ends up in the wheelchair.
Yeah, I was wondering why he was in the wheelchair.
Oh, well, Pam was in the wheelchair because she got shot in the leg. And he was on a stretcher.
Yeah.
Then she died, so he hopped in the
takes
wheelchair.
the wheelchair.
Yeah, but he dies from being set on fire.
Yeah.
By his choice.
Yeah.
Pours petrol, or for you American listeners, gasoline all over himself and gets set on fire and knocks a cop off the edge, and he somehow just instantly dies instead of screaming and dying horribly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that effect I thought was pretty good.
Of him on fire.
Yeah,
because
it's like a dummy.
Yeah.
Which you can tell it's a dummy, but it's practical, and I like that. Whereas Honey
Just
Whitlock,
before that, yeah.
oof.
When they set her hair on fire. How did they do it? Because it looked like her head wasn't even attached to the hair that was
I
on
suppose
fire.
it's like deep fakes 22 years ago.
Yeah.
It looks like they had a dummy or a model or someone standing there, and the head was on fire.
Yeah.
And then they've cut that out digitally and put her face over top of it. So whether or not they've recorded it with the dummy and then recorded her standing there talking and just put to match the lighting and stuff, I don't know, but it's just you couldn't cover her head with some sort of protective stuff, put the wig on and light it on fire, which I've seen people do before.
Because it looks like her head and the hair are moving completely different.
Yeah,
Like they don't move together.
yeah, because it must be a dummy or a mannequin or something,
Yeah.
because it's motionless and her
Mm.
head is
It's
sort of
moving.
going
Yeah.
around in like, because she's a human and she moves when she talks,
Yeah.
so it just ugh.
That's easily the worst shot in the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very effects heavy movie. I don't
No.
think there's really any. I mean, back then there wasn't much in general, but there's not really any CG. There's not many special effects. There's a few explosions.
Yeah, when they kidnap her in the beginning,
Yeah.
and there's like they throw grenades or whatever.
Oh no, pipe bombs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not grenades.
The Satanist. I can't remember her character. Maggie Gyllenhaal's character
Mm.
pulls a pipe bomb out of the plan, sets the timer or the thingo on it, and then puts it back in.
Yeah.
But the pipe bomb was like, it was bigger than her hand,
Mm.
but they were these tiny little explosions.
Yeah, and when it exploded, it was just like smoke.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that you'd imagine just kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were very weak.
Yeah. I mean, a few explosions here or there, gunshots and stuff like that, which were all, I mean, everything was, other than that shot of Honey's head on fire, everything was pretty competently done in this movie. Visually, visual, audio, effects, like all that sort of stuff, was all good, except I think it was let down by the story mostly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because you can sort of, like, especially 2000, put aside, if the special effects aren't amazing, if you've got a good story to watch.
Yeah.
But it lacked story-wise and then lacked
And that's what I
visual
meant.
effects, yeah.
That's what I meant before about Pink Flamingos. If I didn't cut that part out. I'll watch any movie if the story is something.
Yeah.
But if it's just a movie that is a series of vignettes that are just meant to get a reaction out of you, it's not really a story.
No.
And I know,
Yeah.
sorry, I was just going to say, I know there are exceptions to that, like the VHS movies, where there's a very loose overall story and it's just short films in between, but that doesn't try to hide that.
Yeah.
Whereas if a movie was just like, and then they went here and did something shocking, and then they went here and did something shocking, and then they went here and did something shocking, that's crap.
Which is what this movie was. It didn't
Except
leave...
it wasn't shocking.
No, it wasn't. It didn't leave the mark that it was supposed to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's 2022. Of course, we're going to say that, but movies that had come out, before this had been quite gruesome, showed a lot of nudity, not always did well, but movies around this time, and I get that this movie is in a response to the 90s where, I think we've only done 1996 so far, but there's, I think, three, the highest grossing of some of the 90s were, three of them were Disney movies, one was a Pixar movie, one was, there was some other kids movie, but I can't remember.
Mainly family-friendly, safe movies.
Yeah, so I get the message of the movie, but it seems like they're trying way too hard, and it just comes across as dumb.
Yeah, also not hard enough, though. Like, they didn't fully commit to any of the quote-unquote shocking moments that they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, it's quite toothless. The action, while good, I'd say it's a decent, good action.
Yeah.
But for what the movie's saying, shouldn't it be like somebody gets shot in the head and the back of their head just explodes like a watermelon? Or when they're having sex, it should be like,
full nudity, or breasts
and pushing the envelope, and like you can see dick and balls, they talk about it, like Michael Shannon's character Pete is a gay man and he's very gay,
yeah.
I don't know how else to say that, but he's very sexual, very they're all
Openly,
and they're all very sexualized characters, but he's the only gay one, so I guess they focused on him to talk about Dick and Balls.
Mm.
So he was asking Honey Whitlock, like, have you seen Mel Gibson's Dick and Balls? And he just got really into it.
He's
But
like,
they're all really horny,
mm,
but there are, they, what is it, they're celibate for celluloid.
mm,
So they're not having sex.
yeah.
They all sort of rub up against each other and stuff. And at first it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. And then at the end, they're like,
After their last shoot,
Yeah.
they're like, okay, now we can have sex. And they're all like so keen to just jump on each other. But none of them actually take their clothes off. Like, for example, two of the characters, Chardonnay and Lewis.
I think it's Lewis. For some reason, I can't remember. Every time I look at him, I just picture his character, who I also can't remember the name of, from The Walking Dead.
No, well, they're the ones that make the music and all that. Anyway, they jump, like, she jumps into his arms at the end, and then they're, like, having sex, I suppose, but both of them are completely clothed.
They're standing up, fully clothed, dry humping.
Yeah.
Which doesn't work.
You
I
would
haven't
think-
even attempted that ever because it just can't work.
Maybe they're just so horny that it works.
I mean, that's fair, but
But they're supposed to be having sex.
yeah, but
and-
Cecil and Cherish, she hops onto him, cowgirl position, and it like she does some hand movements as though she's getting it out and putting it in her.
his out. Yeah, but
Yeah.
she's wearing a skin tight, full length jumpsuit.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't see her like rip her clothing or whatever. So
Yeah.
I guess he supposedly has his dick out and she's just clothed
But
riding him.
then we see him get up, and it's not out.
No, yeah.
I mean, we talked about Bad Moon a couple of weeks ago, and in that, there's a way more intense
Nudity,
sex scene. You even see Michael Paré's balls in that.
Exactly.
And in this, there's nothing. There's even the bit where they go into the cinema, at the porno theater, and they're all
Such
the
a
men
weird
in
concept.
there are jacking off.
Yeah.
But you don't ever see anything, which good.
Thank you.
But they're watching Cherish, because she's a porn star,
yeah.
on the thing, and I will give it to that where the context of that is really fucked up. She's it's an anal movie. Sorry, we should give a warning. There's a lot of very sexual stuff in this movie.
Yeah,
The talk of a lot of it is very sexual and very violent, but the actual, what you see, that's what we're talking about. There's none of it. So,
we're not just saying that, like, we're not just saying this because we're like, damn, we didn't get to see some boobs. We're saying this because, the movie was supposed to be, like, John Waters' goal was supposed to be not censored at all.
Yeah.
Like, he hates censorship. And then there was none of that in this movie. No gore, no nudity.
Yeah.
Not even much swearing, I guess.
Yeah, there was a lot of, it was kind of like tell, don't show.
Yeah.
Cherish talks about when she's 9, or when she was 9, her whole family fucked her in front of the Christmas tree.
Under the
Christmas tree. And she says, like, my dad sat on my face while he opened his Christmas
Yeah.
presents. And it's meant to be like, she's made all this stuff up to justify being a depraved porn star.
Yeah.
Or it really happened, and that's really sad, but I mean,
was
it's played
funny.
it's played for laughs.
Yeah.
And because when she starts to say it, everyone's like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it just comes so far out of nowhere.
I know. That cracked me up.
And there's a lot of very overt sexual conversations in this. And like I was saying before about the porno theater, the movie that they're watching is Cherish and her hamster or gerbil or whatever it is crawls into her asshole.
Is that what it was?
It's rear entry, and she's like
Yeah.
on her hands and knees. She's like, I got some peanut butter or something like that here for you.
Oh my God.
And then it crawls around her legs, and then it cuts to her face, and she's like, oh, what are you doing back there?
Jesus Christ.
And that's like, oh no.
That's
that
messed up.
and I'm like, okay, that's something really messed up in the
Yeah.
movie, and I'm glad we didn't see it because that's a crime
Mm.
and disgusting and everything. But I was like, okay, you're pushing something there,
Mm.
but we didn't see her naked. We didn't see any, like, it was just on the edge, and it didn't go over it ever.
Yeah, yeah.
It peaked over the edge and sort of, pushed it a little bit, but nothing that you'd ever go, oh wow, that was in that movie. I remember this movie for that.
Yeah, like nothing so gross or violent or anything stood out to go, that's that movie where they don't give a fuck and they just did whatever.
Yeah.
No, you don't get any of that, really.
And on the when we're talking about the sex scene at the end, Pete picks up a guy, grabs a guy, and so does, I can't remember her name, the Satanist, picks up a guy.
Yeah.
And they're doing the same thing as Chardonnay and Lewis, where they're grinding on each other. But Pete grabs the fella, turns around, and is like, grabs his head, and it's clearly like he's motioning that the guy's giving him head.
Yeah.
And then he goes down first, and then, they swap.
Yeah.
But when he turns around, you can see that his jeans are fully zipped up. It's just so strange. And there's like shots of the coppers looking through their telescopes. Oh, it's not telescopes, rifle scopes.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're like, oh, what's going on up there? Not just at the gay characters, but everyone. They just,
like, what are they doing?
there's a shootout going on, and they're like, time to bang.
Yeah.
And Fidget, it's probably the most overt thing in the movie, puts his hand down his pants and starts jacking off, and you
he
actually see the hand
unzips
motions.
his pants. Yeah.
And he's the only one.
Yeah.
And I mean, John Waters is a gay man. That he has gone on record, I suppose you'd say, as being he's not. He's obviously gay, so he's not anti-gay, but he says there's too many rules in the gay community. So I think that he's the kind of guy that wants to shock and offend everyone,
but fails.
But in this movie, fails.
In this movie, yeah.
I read the summary of Pink Flamingos, and it shocked me more than anything in
just
this movie.
reading it, exactly.
Yeah.
This movie didn't get any of that.
Not
Maybe
even
he
close.
just should have stopped after Pink Flamingos and not tried to do that same sort of thing again.
Well, he did a few, I didn't bother reading about them, but he did a few that were really shocking. But, I mean, a few little touches to this, and he would have gotten exactly what he wanted. And the critics at the time were saying the same things that we're saying now. This movie had so much potential to be shocking and make a big statement, but instead it was like, oh, down with censorship, bloodless action, bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
Fully clothed sex
scenes,
it just doesn't make sense.
But I wonder why, like, what stopped him?
Couldn't find too much about the movie.
No, I'm sure there's a reason why they couldn't go full on. But he does talk about the movie as if he did reach the goal that he wanted.
But what was that?
I don't know.
Because if his goal was to just tell a story about characters who would kill over their opinions, sure, he did it, but it's such an intense, extreme movie, but there's no violence. Like, even back then, they said it wasn't shocking.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, oh, okay, like, not too long ago, we went and watched The Northman, which, that on its own isn't too, I mean, it is pretty weird, and it's very, very violent. But the director who made that, Robert Eggers, he made The Witch and The Lighthouse, which I think 20 years ago had no right being mainstream.
Yeah.
But now you go to the cinemas and watch that, and people talk about it and everything, and it's the big talk of the town. So maybe things were very different back then, but I've seen plenty of movies from back in the 90s that
don't hold back,
from fairly confronting.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park was bloodier than this movie, and that's a family movie. I just don't understand why, Yeah.
Why push that message so much, but then not deliver on it?
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
another reason why I felt like it was making fun of the characters.
Yeah.
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 But I mean, everybody plays their role well.
Yeah, like we said before, back then they might not have been too well known, but with characters like Maggie Gyllenhaal, Michael Shannon, Melanie Griffith, like
I can't remember his character's name. I'm pretty sure it was Lewis, but Lawrence Gilliard Jr. He was in The Walking Dead.
yeah, a lot of famous people.
Yeah, I
like
don't
famous now.
recognize Chardonnay or her actress's name, but 22 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Or Dinah. I think that Dinah, I haven't seen them in anything else. Or Fidget.
Yeah.
Or Rodney looked familiar. But at first I was like, holy shit, is that Val Kilmer? So, yeah, but there's he would have been much bigger than that back then.
So some pretty big names in this movie.
Well, now they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think that, and obviously, Stephen Dorff and Melanie Griffith.
Yeah, I said her.
Yeah, why? I'm just saying. Also, Kevin Nealon. This is his name? Yeah, Kevin Nealon, who's in it to play Forrest Gump.
Oh, yeah.
In Forrest Gump again.
Gump again.
He's not huge, but he's a name. And
Yeah,
Eric
I
Roberts is in it for a scene as Honey's ex and Roseanne, but they usually get talk show hosts, not talk show hoes, to when somebody's or gets famous and they're watching news clips and stuff. So it had a lot of attention, and pretty much everyone does a good job.
Yeah, they do a decent job, especially I like Maggie Gyllenhaal in this. I think she's
a tremendous
delivered.
actress.
Yeah. Melanie Griffith, this was not one of her best roles.
At first, she felt very wooden to me. When she's being the diva and the bitch at the start. But then
I loved her when she was doing that.
But then, sort of around a bit over, or close to the halfway mark, or maybe when she had been with them after they've done their first scene, and she's acting a lot more natural, I was sort of got into the character a lot more, and she came across as a lot more natural, whereas at first, when she's her true self, she's a bitch,
didn't seem real.
Yeah. So, I think that's probably the only place that really got let down, other than some small roles that don't really matter. I think my favorite character was that random guy that just joins them after the porno theater, who loves
he's
them
like
all.
Honey's boyfriend or something.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, we should do this and we should do this. And she's like, just settle down, all right?
Yeah.
Speaking of him, I mean, the last time we see him, he's being beaten down by the crowd. But just before that, he's there with the gang, and they shove him out. And then as soon as it cuts back to Cecil, then back to them, and he's just standing there again. Yes.
Editing mistake, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just a little continuity error, and there's like a couple of weird dissolves or fades, and when a scene just ends, it's like John Waters couldn't figure out a way to get him out of the porno theater, so it just fades when the random guy meets him, and then they're like pulling into the thing. It cuts like 5 minutes out that I think we could have used. Other than that, like I said, it's pretty competently made. There's nothing that, other than the Honey Whitlock hair on fire scene, that really stood out to me as looking bad.
I sort of felt like when the scenes that they were in their warehouse or abandoned theatre or whatever, to me looked like a play, looked like a set on stage.
I think that was the point. Not that was the point, but I think that because they had to steal all the parts, that was just what happened.
Yeah, I think those scenes, they sound echoey, but there's so much stuff in their warehouse. So that's why it sort of feels like, that's just half, and then there's empty space everywhere.
Oh, yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, even though their warehouse was, like, that was a sensory overload. So much stuff
Especially
in that warehouse.
That, like, dollhouse shot.
Yeah.
Where he blows the horn and they're all in their little cub cot areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when they're talking and all that, and the sound in those scenes when they're in the warehouse is echoey, I felt.
I think
like they were in a big space.
Well, I think it's okay. Well, they were in a abandoned theater. I think it is. The Hippodrome. Yeah, it's an abandoned theater. All shot in Baltimore.
Yeah.
The hellhole that it is.
Yeah.
Sorry if anyone listens to this from Baltimore, but from what I've heard, oh boy.
Not a good place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice it as much as you did, I guess.
I suppose it's just low budget. That's what comes with it.
$10 million.
Bad set.
I suppose it is low budget.
Bad set, bad audio.
I suppose it'd be more $10 million back then. Inflation wasn't as much. So $12, $13 million now. But who cares?
I guess I just got the sense that they they filmed it in maybe a big warehouse, but only set up half of it.
Oh, yeah.
So when they were recording, you've got all that echo behind them.
Or that was intentional because they are in a big space, so it's supposed to come across as like this. The sound. It's supposed to sound different.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
I think it was a very minor thing that maybe some people would stick out to.
Yeah, I just felt like I was in an audience watching a play or a theater.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's fitting that they were in an abandoned warehouse, an abandoned cinema, because they are the orphans of something cinema. Very cult-like talk.
Very cult-like, yeah.
Yeah, they brand each other at one point after Rodney dies. Yeah. I do always enjoy a good long opening credits to get like a feel of what the movie's going to be about. And you see it's like, oh, Star Wars and Star Trek are all over the cinema, and then that changes to Steven Dorff, and then some other thing changes to producers and directors and the other actors and cast and crew and whatever. And I like that, but
this went for way too long.
Yeah, it sort of was like, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
And then it kept going, and then it was like, all right, I get it.
Let's
and then
get into the movie now. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that while the idea itself is good, definitely went on for too long. Instead of like 6 things changing to one name, it should have been equal.
Yeah.
So it should have been like all 6 change and then just all the names.
That must just be of its time though, because I think we said the same thing about last week, Mission Impossible 2. It also had a very long sequence.
Yeah, I think it's a lost art.
Yeah.
It can be done really well, but there's a balance. And some of them, like I think Spider-Man 2 shows like all the events of Spider-Man 1 in the opening credits just to give you a recap.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of neat.
If you do it in a cool, interesting way where it's kind of fun to watch, then it's not too bad. But when you're just changing different words to other different words, then it's boring.
It's definitely shifted more now to big, loud ending credits. Yeah. Which I think makes more sense. Yeah. Because you get in and watch the movie, and then it's like, here's a big song and dance ending, and here's all the that person was in this, that person, that's cool.
Yeah. It doesn't set a very good tone for the movie when your opening credits you're already bored. Like, you're supposed to be grabbed.
That's a bit harsh.
Well, your attention is supposed to be grabbed from the beginning. And if you're sitting there and you're like, oh my god, far out.
Well,
can we get into the movie now?
Gen Zers and you.
I don't have patience, man.
I know, that's what I'm saying. You're always on those damn phones. watching the Kardashians. Far
Don't put me down like that.
or we just leave this world behind. Yeah, well, we talked about a bit about the jokes before, the big ones, but I did really like the Rodney just being infuriated by the fact that he's very straight. And he's
Yeah.
trying his hardest to be gay because Pete's in love with him, but every time he kisses him, he's like, "Oh, I just feel his whiskers, and
yeah.
I can't handle that certain firmness in his pants." Just
So funny.
and then Pete's just looking at him, and he's just like, "Oh."
Yeah.
Just all the joke scenes. As a comedy, I think that pretty much every joke lands,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of laugh out loud moments and a lot of good, like the bit where, is it, whatever her name, the Satanist says, "Suicide for Satan," and then looks at Honey Whitlock, and she just shakes her finger. But the way
yeah.
Melanie Griffith does it is just so funny.
Yeah. And most of the jokes in this movie were original and funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a shame the rest of the movie didn't match up.
Yeah, it's like you can tell when a director or a writer is really proficient in one area, and John Waters, I think, is very good at comedy writing,
Yeah.
as opposed to action.
Yeah.
Because even though the action was good, it was pretty plain. But I liked it. Don't get me wrong. But the jokes that were interwoven in that made it good. Like the International Brotherhood of Teamsters scene, I thought was really funny because it's just
so random,
so out of nowhere that they tie up these big burly guys and they get out and they're like, "Nobody messes with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters." And I thought, oh, they're gonna go fist fight them, and these guys just come out packing heat, just start blowing away people, just and
the jokes were the star of this movie.
Yeah, and there were a couple of little things in that where, like, the Lewis, he's the set designer, so he has the big staple gun, staples that guy's neck, and which doesn't do anything right away, and it's not until minutes later that guy finally drops dead. Yeah, so it's got some good stuff there.
I also liked in the beginning where before Honey Whitlock has been kidnapped and she's telling her like assistant woman, she's like, "Has Pat Nixon ever been fucked in this room?" And then she's like, ask the reception.
And her assistant's like, "I'm pretty sure that Pat Nixon's a stroke victim."
Yeah. She's like, "Just ask them." And then she does. And then Honey Whitlock's like, "Wait, you actually did that?"
What is wrong with you?
Yeah, that was funny.
That was good. The sick kid.
The
sick kid part. I really liked that shows just how fake
all
is Hollywood and everything, and this kid's like, "I don't want to be here." He had open heart surgery 7 days before.
ago.
That kid is exhausted. Just let him lay down and sleep.
Yeah.
And he's, "Don't touch me, ugly." And Honey Whitlock gives him a kiss on the cheek, and he's like that typical kid, like wiping it, and then the woman turns his oxygen off.
Yeah.
But when Honey Whitlock gets kidnapped, he's like, yeah.
And then he's laughing when the woman just dies right there next to him. That kid was hilarious.
And it was, at first I was like, oh, it'd be good if some of these characters came back, but they didn't need to.
No, yeah.
It's good to just have these characters come in, do their thing, and then the little kid didn't need to come back.
No.
Yeah, so it's good. It's one of those things where we're like, oh, this was good and this was good, but the movie overall is bad.
Yeah.
Like the sum of its parts just isn't up to snuff. It's so hard to pick because I'm like, oh, I really like that joke and I like that action scene. I like little touches like, you're getting introduced to the gang and they're doing their little, oh, it's this time, and they say a code phrase. And all that's fine, and you get to see what kind of characters they are. They all have guns just stashed around
everywhere
the place.
in the popcorn.
But two that don't have little code words until I think later on is the limo driver played by Michael Shannon, Pete, and Rodney, who starts off as the fake bodyguard.
Yeah.
And they're in the front of the limo together, and Pete gives a sly look at Rodney, and at first you think he's going to be like, what the fuck's up with that? But then they both smile, and I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Just no dialogue, just shows that he's in on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty neat.
Yeah, see, there is good parts in this movie, but when you're watching a bad movie, you have to pick it apart to try and justify why you're watching it. It's like, well, what was good in this movie?
And this movie was a lot of fun, I think. You know, like last week we said, this Mission Impossible has all these action scenes, but it's boring. Bad movies are easier and more fun to talk about.
Yeah.
And when you find the good stuff in them, especially ones like this where it's bad but it's fun and it's wild, you know, I'll probably think about some of the jokes in this movie for a fair while, and I wouldn't mind going back to this. So,
yeah,
you know, I think it's interesting in that way. Same as Bad Moon, I suppose, which we talked about, where not great, but I'm like, oh, that movie was very memorable to me.
Yeah.
One not very good thing was, like we said at the very start, this movie is just, then this happens and this happens, then a different variation of the same thing happens. Like, they have their first big, well, they have one bit where there's another joke that I liked, where they bust in to the theater, and he's like, Cecil B. Demented's like, you're in my movie. I'm Cecil B. Demented. You look at the camera or flub your line and you're dead. And the girl just goes, oh my God, do you know Quentin Tarantino? I love his movies. Just doesn't even bat an eye.
Doesn't notice the gun pointed at her.
Just, what is it? Baltimore. Just Baltimore.
Yeah,
you know.
pretty much.
And then, you know, they bust up the popcorn stand and flip the table and go in and throw tear gas through the Patch Adams screening.
Yeah.
And apparently everyone loved that. Yeah. But then the second really big one where the cops come and things start to get really serious.
But again, they do the same thing. They say, you know, we're here filming, eat those oysters, you know, your extras and all that. And then they flip a table. And it's like, well, and it looks like the exact same table that they flipped earlier. So
Probably
it's just
is.
the same thing again.
Yeah. And then, you know, it's like, oh, you were going to make this movie based on a video game. Oh, what a crime. And, oh, you made the American remake of that foreign language film. Now, that one, I do kind of agree with.
Yeah.
Because usually they stuff it up.
Yeah.
But the guy says, oh, you know, American audiences, they'll never watch subtitles. Yeah. Probably fair. I don't know. We're not from America. We're from somewhere. So,
but I don't mind reading subtitles.
I think I mean, sometimes it helps.
Yeah, I usually have to have the subtitles on anyway.
Yeah. And, you know, back in the day, the video game one, that was probably a more accurate thing. But, you know, they're all about the sanctity of film, but it's just, what they're doing is just crap.
Yeah.
You know, they're just running around being like, oh, we're making movies.
Yeah,
and
just causing havoc.
Yeah.
Shooting people.
Well, they are terrorists.
Yeah.
I do like that bit with Fidget rings up his mum, and he's like, oh, the movie's going really well. And she says, really well? Fidget, you're wanted for murder.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, well, I suppose there's a reason why we keep going, oh, that joke was good. Oh, that joke was good, because
it's the only good thing in this movie.
Yeah, but yeah, then, you know, then Rodney, that's where Rodney dies, is blown away. It really caught me by surprise. I was like, holy shit, when he just gets shot a bunch of times and dies.
Yeah.
And they just have to leave him behind. And that's where I think the only other person who gets shot there is Cecil.
Yeah.
Gets shot in the arm, and then Honey gets taken by the cops, and they take the cop car down and get her out, and then a bunch of old or middle-aged women are coming out of the cinema and just harass them.
Yeah, and where were the cops? Like, they were in a sort of like, not really a police chase, but they kidnapped her back from the police car, and then they're just outside a cinema
Yeah.
mouthing off with some old women.
And I'm like, oh, did they just kill all the cops?
Yeah, like
Because we
there's
don't
nobody
see
else
it.
after them, with there are only 2 police officers
Yeah.
available that day.
And the women are just throwing jelly beans at them.
Yeah.
And they just run away and they go into this theater. And at first I misheard it and I thought he was saying, stunt guys,
Yeah.
help us. Because they're all big buff. But no, they're action fans and it's like this run down cinema. But the nice one that's like, no NC-17 or R or I can't remember the other ones that they have over there will ever be shown here. Or maybe in XXX. But the action cinema is like all run down and dirty.
Yeah.
But they go in there and they're like, action fans, help us.
Yeah. And then
they-
they're all like, yep.
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, you go, Cecil. And Honey and him are signing, or it might just be Honey, are signing autographs and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it just, they're back at the place and mourning Rodney. And then
brand themselves.
Yeah, and then the next time they go out and have a big shootout, and that's where Lyle, is his name Lyle? The guy who's always on drugs.
I think so.
Yeah, I think his name's he gets shot in the head, but because he's on so many drugs, it doesn't kill him immediately.
Yeah.
Or the gun was just weak. But yeah, he gets shot in the head, and Dinah gets shot in the stomach and the chest. And that's the only time Cecil has a reaction. He's like,
yeah.
Dinah!
Yeah, but we don't... I thought that part was weird. He was so upset that they died, but we don't see them having like a relationship or a friendship at all, really.
Yeah. So, and then it just cuts to them running away.
Yeah.
And the only time that they ever mention somebody dying is when Rodney dies. They're back at the place and he's like, you know, Rodney died for this and he's in film hell and we'll meet him again one day and everything.
But they don't address the other people dying.
Yeah. And then, you know, after they get away this time, it just, they go to the porno theater and it's the masturbators that help them. Yeah.
The sickos. I didn't know that was a real thing.
I knew that was a real
discussed that.
thing. And you were very shocked
Very
to find
shocked.
out the reality.
I
But
just cannot believe that.
it's called a safe space, all right?
A safe space is your own home.
Well, I'm like, I get it, but at the same time, it's fucking disgusting.
Men don't need a special screening in the cinema to watch porn.
Excuse me. When 50 Shades of Grey came out, I heard many a tale of cucumbers and wet seats.
Is that
and
true though?
It couldn't have been said and spread around so many times, and the people be like, I wish that this didn't fucking happen to me. But
Yeah, okay,
I was
fair
cleaning
enough.
up and there was wet something all over the seat. And then I found a wet cucumber in one cinema, and that was all over I don't know if it happened here, but all over America.
Fair enough, but 50 Shades wasn't showing purely for women for a safe space for them to go and masturbate. But
Which is worse. They went to a public place and committed a crime. Whereas, to the best of my knowledge, you pay to go into that cinema. It's your business what happens in there.
people still have to go there and clean up semen.
That's their job. That they know what they're signing up for.
No.
Just get a big fire hose. You know what? Burn the cinema down and build a new one.
Yeah. Anyway, either way, men, women, whoever, do not touch yourself in the cinema, please. That's gross. Other people have to sit there.
Just touch each other.
Other people have to clean that up.
Do what normal people do and touch each other.
But still, that leaves liquids. Just go to the bathroom or do it at home, in the car, whatever.
In the car?
Yeah. It's better than a public place where somebody else has to clean up your mess.
I suppose.
Or see you. Anyway, the whole idea of
I think that we've gone down a
porn
dark road
theaters
here.
is just so messed up.
Yeah, it opens up a real can of worms of like what was going on. You know what I mean?
Who thought that that was okay?
I mean, I imagine they made a lot of money over it, but the internet was just like, you don't even have to
Leave your house.
You don't even have to hop out of bed. If you can reach your phone, you can do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, To get back on
Yeah,
track.
what were we saying?
We just started talking about porno theaters and I blacked out. You know, it's just the same thing happens, but then that time they don't go back to the Hippodrome. It just fades and they're at the drive-in theater.
Yeah.
Another thing that's dying off.
Yeah.
But
it's still more popular than porn theaters, but
you don't know that.
There's a drive-in like a few hours away.
That's here.
Mm.
But you don't know how many. I don't think they have them here because
Porn
prostitution is legal here. So you don't need a porno theater.
Yeah. That's why I said drive-ins are more popular than...
True. All right. No,
theaters.
you're right. Yes. I concede.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that's where Cherish dies while supposedly... Oh, Pam dies first. She gets shot in the head. Then...
Who's Pam?
The short-haired one. She was the cinematographer. She wasn't in it very much.
Oh,
She was sort of to the back.
Yeah.
But I remember her name, but not the Satanist's name.
Yeah, what was her name?
I can't. I just keep thinking Maggie.
Yeah.
So, sorry. Yeah. Then Pam dies, and then Cecil's like, "All right, principal photography is wrapped," and Cherish is like, you know, one of her friends is just lying dead, and she's like, "So we can fuck." And then jumps on him and supposedly is riding him, and as she's climaxing, gets shot in the head by... I mean, it might as well be a paintball gun, because it's just a dot on her head, and then she falls over dead. And
then he just pushes her aside.
He's just like, ooh, you know, my invisible penis was just inside of you.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they're like, oh, let's get out of here. And I don't think... Oh, Cecil dies after that, but he's the only other one who dies. Because the Satanist gets away in hearse.
Yep.
Lewis, I think his name is Lewis. Like, this is going to be really bad if we've been saying Lewis this whole time and it's not. He and Chardonnay get away with some other people with the movie. Fidget is mucking around and gets shot in the exact... Because he gets shot earlier in the exact same spot as he did before.
And that's the spot that he always fidgets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably shot his dick off. And then he falls onto his mum and dad's bonnet. And they're like, oh, good, we've got you home. And Cecil lights himself on fire, or Fidget lights him on fire. Then he knocks that cop off and dies. And his parents, who, you know, his parents have come there, are like, that's what you get?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real...
Bad acting.
Just kind of like... Just overly mean. That line, not even any emotion, just, oh, our son just set himself on fire and died anyway.
Yeah.
Which I suppose I'll give it to John Waters. That shocked me a little bit. Congratulations.
And then I did like this. It was like contrast between the beginning and then the ending, where in the beginning we see Honey Whitlock before she's been kidnapped. And she hops out the limo and everyone is like on the sides, or the fans are like screaming that she loves her and stuff, and she's walking through all the fans like that. And then at the end, after she's lit her hair on fire and everything and she's been taken away, half of the people surrounding her are like love her and asking for autographs and stuff, and then half the people are like cursing her, and her hair is black and sizzled and she looks like a mess, and she's just blowing kisses and all that. And I think that shows a good transition from the beginning, her being so like such a diva and just loving the praise and all that, and then through the whole movie, and then at the end she isn't upset by people who are hating on her.
I think it shows the growth, where instead of being annoyed or anything like that at criticism, a true artist should make their body of work should be divisive. You know, things, if you make things just to please the fans, you know, the message of this movie is that's not art. That's just pandering and you know, in the Hollywood machine, which is fair, absolutely. You know, like I said, we watched Spider-Man No Way Home a while back. I loved it.
Mm.
We watched The Northman not too long ago, or Fresh. We
Yeah,
watched
Fresh was
not
good.
too long ago, and I'd rather watch either of those two a million times over before I watched Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah.
But I was really keen for Spider-Man No Way Home, and I loved it when I watched
Mm.
it. But I'm like, cool. And we had this trouble when we talked about Captain America: Civil War. Was it's like, yeah, it's a good movie, but it's not going to stick with me.
No, yeah.
You know, whereas this will stick with me. Mission Impossible 2 won't stick with me.
No.
I think that for a movie, well, some parts of Mission Impossible 2 I will never recover from. But, uh, you know, a true artist doesn't make work to please.
Yeah.
They make an
From
honest
the heart.
thing. Yeah. So I guess we're here talking about, oh, he failed at this and failed at this, but John Waters, I think if the message of his movie was to make a movie that you want to make and people will either love it or hate it, and if they hate it, you've got a reaction, and if they love it, you've got a reaction, but
Mm.
it's the worst thing a movie can be, in my opinion, is boring.
Yeah.
Bad or good, and yeah.
For a lot of this movie, I was bored, but then there were moments that brought me back, and that was mainly the jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that even though I didn't really like this movie, and I don't think it's very good, it is memorable
Mm.
and it stands out. And I at first I said it was so bad it's good, but I don't even think it's there. I think it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's just doesn't quite scratch
there.
the itch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's Cecil B. Demented.
Mm-hmm.
What do you, Demi, rate Cecil B. Demented, the movie?
I rate it trash.
Trash here also.
Yeah.
You might think that that's harsh because we praised the movie so much, but
As a whole,
it's either
it is
it's
trash.
cash versus the trash, which is, you know, cash financially and trash financially, and then we decide
Opinionally,
yeah, our opinions, and we specifically chose it's one or the other because
no middle.
it has to be one or the other.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
push yourself on what to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is trash.
Mm. Last week we talked about Mission Impossible 2, which was the highest grossing movie of 2000. And I think that, strangely, that is the kind of movie that the message of this movie was rallying against.
Yeah.
The message of this movie is that create art for it to mean something, not to just be successful. And as we know, Tom Cruise's plan for Mission Impossible 2 was that he wanted it to be successful.
Yeah.
He wasn't as interested in making a good movie as he was interested in making a successful movie.
Yeah.
Which is what led to all those problems. You know, oh, we need to get this director to make the movie this way so it'll be good and successful. Or we need to do this so it'll be this way, and the lines need to be better, and I need to come in and edit. And he took over. Whereas the message of Cecil B. Demented is make a movie with that your heart is in that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's all you need to do.
Yep.
And I think that really shows, and that's why I rated Mission Impossible 2 trash and this trash.
But in very different ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would watch this any day of the week over that.
Me too. I would much rather watch this movie than watch Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more else to say than that.
Yeah.
But it makes sense that this was bottom of the rung
Yeah.
and that was up the top.
Very easy to see why this was,
Yeah.
lowest.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that that just about wraps it up. I thought that we'd have more to say at the end there, but I mean,
Well, Mission Impossible 2 sucked.
yeah. I mean, I suppose it's John Waters, as far as we can tell, this was his full vision to make this movie. He wrote it and he directed it, and it wasn't a big studio movie. Whereas John Woo came in to make a movie, and every step of the way he was stopped and hindered.
Taken over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that explains that.
Yeah.
So, this has been Cecil B. Demented, finishing off the year 2000.
Yep.
So, where can people find us, Demi?
You can find us on Instagram. That's our main social platform right now. It is at Cash versus Trash Pod. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. We also have a YouTube channel, and we have a Patreon. Please check that out if you want to.
Yeah, if you like what you hear and you want to support the show, it would make things much easier for us.
Yeah, really would help us, yeah. But all the links will be in the description, so you can just follow them from there.
And if you want to get in touch with us directly, the best way to do that would be to email us at cashversustrashpod@gmail.com, all lowercase. Send that through. I have it set up so that'll come straight through to my phone if you email us there. And next week we're going to be covering 2007, starting with the highest grossing movie of that year, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End.
Yeah, so that's the third one.
Yes, the third in a franchise.
Yeah.
No surprise that it beat the rest.
Yeah.
Very successful, very good franchise.
Yeah. So
tune in next week to find out.
We'll be covering that one. That wraps up this episode. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
This has been the Cash vs. Trash podcast.
See ya.